Welcome to the Bald Brad Show. Our first segment of the day is regarding Friday's White House press briefing, where the gladiator, Peter Doocy of Fox News, squares off with Jean-Pierre regarding where's Joe Biden at with these debt negotiations. And folks, he catches her here. But before we jump into any of that, support a true American patriot by hitting that like and subscribe button. Leave us a short, sweet comment down below. Your help support would be greatly appreciated. Now, Peter Doocy is pretty far away from the mic, so he's hard to hear, so I have the captions on for you guys. So listen carefully. Let's go ahead and roll it.
Thanks, Green. So the last time that we got this close to a debt ceiling default, President Obama deputized his vice president to lead the negotiations. Why doesn't President Biden trust Vice President Harris to lead these negotiations while he's in Asia?
Well, I disagree with your the premise of your question. The president does. Well, let me.
She could be at the Capitol. Why isn't she?
The president
Correct.
entrusts the vice president, as we all know, as we have stated many times. She was in the meeting that with the congressional members that occurred very recently, right before the president left for Japan. She has been in regular conversations as well, and has been in conversations with the president. He has taken her consult and listened to her advice, as he always does on many issues. This is one of many issues, and so that has not changed. And I think you actually said something that is incredibly important. The president has been there before, right? He has dealt with these types of negotiations, these types of conversations before. He knows how this all works. This is not new to him, and this is why he is optimistic. And this is why these conversations are going to continue, and he's going to stay on top of them.
Let's be fair. Joe Biden's giving Kamala Harris the pity invite. That's what it is. You feel bad. You want to make sure her presence is there because she is your vice president. But he's put her in a leadership position before, and she hasn't done anything. She was the border czar. He put her in position to fix the whole thing. And if anything, she exacerbated the problem along with DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. She made the problem worse. And this does not come as a shock to me. I was complaining about it when it happened because I saw what she did to the state of California and how she ran that in the ground, or at least one of the people that ran it into the ground. I mean, California today is a shell of what it used to be. It's just not what it was. Democrats have ran it into the ground. It wasn't Republicans that did it. It was Democrats that did it. In the same way that Democrats ran Chicago. I know we're hounding Democrats a lot here, but it's just a fact of what their policies are doing. If they just instituted good policies that allowed states to flourish, I'd be happy for them and I would vote for them. But they don't do that. They want a massive crime. They want all these things to take place that are ruining cities across the country. Here, he's just inviting her there. Oh, he's taking her consultation. Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm sure he is. Joe Biden ain't listening to anybody. Joe Biden ain't listening to no one.
You said you're assuming the president will be updated momentarily by the team. What was he doing for the last several hours while they were in these meetings?
Well,
Thank you, Peter. Thank you. Where's Joe Biden at anytime? We saw that his White House aides were having issues with his scheduling outside of the realm of 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. They can't schedule the guy at any time because he's not all there. By the way, that's not me just hounding Joe Biden. That's coming from his own White House aides, you guys. So when I say things like that, it's not like I'm just pulling out of thin air. That's coming from his own White House aides. In the same way, a lot of people think I'm joking when I say, oh, Joe Biden might trip over a wire or a cord in the White House and break his hip or keel over. No, that's not coming from me. That's coming from his White House aides. They're literally terrified that this guy's going to trip over a camera cord when he's recording or moving around the White House. He almost fell down a flight of stairs just the other day again. And these weren't like little stairs. The guy, it would have been disastrous if Trump would have saw it. It would have been terrible. The guy would have fell. And I don't want anything bad to happen to Joe Biden. He's my president. But to sit here and raise awareness to the fact of what does Joe Biden actually do, she can't sit here and answer. So let's just hear her response.
they were having conversations, right? They were on the Hill, the negotiators. But how would he? Yeah, but how would he be updated if they're still having conversations on the Hill? It just ended moments ago.
Couldn't he call him?
Look, Peter.
He just
Look,
conducted,
wait, look, Peter.
The first year of his term, he conducted, because of the COVID pandemic, by video conference. Is that not possible right now?
Look, Peter, we're going to.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you. Logical. He didn't even have to go to Japan, right? These are these climate extremists, folks. They complain about carbon emissions, and it's not just him flying over to Japan, right? You have the entire Secret Service. They sit there and take the cargo planes. They drop off all these vehicles, multiple limousines. I mean, You guys, the carbon emissions that come from the president is insane. So the same guy that's pushing this whole climate extreme, climate accord, all this stuff is flying Japan when he spent, like you just saw Peter Doocy say, just telephoning in, just do FaceTime and Zoom like we are doing here is basically all it is. But, hey, she doesn't want to give details on exactly what he was doing for 7 hours. Have you noticed that? Very easily could have said, hey, he was in meetings. He was in meetings with other, heck, I don't know, leaders around the world, whatever he does. But nobody knows what he does. He won't even take the press's questions. Nobody does. She doesn't even know. And she's this White House press secretary. She's a mouthpiece and she has no idea.
Give the space to these negotiators, the time and the space to have these conversations. That's what we're going to do. The president is going to continue to be updated regularly, daily, as he has been for the past couple of days, and that's how we're moving forward. That's how we're seeing this process. The president has sat down twice with congressional leaders very recently to hear them out, to have the conversation.
Recently, this has been going on for like 100 days, like 3+ months, and he just recently sat down with them. That's not a good thing. A good thing.
To talk about his budget, to talk about the urgency of getting the debt limit done, of Congress doing their job, and so he continued to hold the line in that way. And so, look, we're going to have the negotiators have their conversation. They just ended their last convening, if you will, and they're going to reconvene. I'm certain of that. And so the president's going to get an update from his team as he did last night, as he done the last couple of days. I'm just going to keep going. Go ahead.
I would keep going too, Kareem, because you just got shellacked by Peter Doocy, just as you always do. And Peter sat there and he took the moment and he ran with it, calling her out on a litany of things of, hey, why can't Kamala Harris handle the negotiations? She's in Los Angeles for some reason. Why can't she just go over to the Capitol or work in Washington with the House and figure this whole thing out? At least be somebody to just listen in, as Joe Biden likes to have her do. And she's the one that can actually sit there and tell the president what's going on. Furthermore, why isn't the president just, phoning in himself? What has he been doing for these last 7 hours? In the same way that he went to Ireland with his family, right? But it was for diplomacy, right? It's for foreign policy. It was to do the work of the office of the president, as he sat there and chauffeured his entire family and visited like some building that his grandfather had something to do with. I guess he was a brick worker or something like that. But that was all on taxpayer dollars. So we know what he's doing, you guys. Again, if you connect the dots, the guy doesn't work between certain hours. They're in a foreign country. I'm sure he has jet lag, just as any of us else would. The guy's like 100 years old. So he's probably sleeping those 7 hours. We're not kidding when we say about his schedule. They have a tough time scheduling this guy between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. That's all he works. We're supposed to be excited, you guys, that he does a little bit of exercise. Okay, and the whole schedule thing doesn't just come from the White House aides that reported to Axios, which is where I'm getting that report from. But also, you had his prior White House press secretary, Jen Psaki, on the news saying the exact same thing of, well, he doesn't do anything before like 9 a.m. So when she was in the office, suppose it was 9 a.m. Now it's 10 a.m. So it's just getting actually worse and worse as time goes on. He's doing a little bit amount of work. So let me know. Let me know anything in the comment section below. Is Joe Biden putting in the hours, folks? I don't think so. Well, the next footage that we have, or next segment we are going to have here, is Byron Donalds, who's a Republican of Florida. He's kind of making the rounds in the spotlight here. Very well organized, speaks very orderly, very clearly, and he's very good at his messaging and answering questions. So I want to give him a little bit of spotlight. He's on Meet the Press here, answering a litany of questions from raising the debt ceiling to why you supporting Donald Trump over Ron DeSantis since you're in Florida. All these great questions. We'll give him the spotlight. Hit that like and subscribe button, folks. If you haven't already, let's go ahead and roll it.
To endorse Donald Trump. Congressman Donald, welcome to Meet the Press.
It's good to be with you, Chuck.
Before we start with the politics, sort of the political junkie conversation, I want to talk about the debt ceiling. You're a member of the Freedom Caucus on here. Where are you going to be comfortable with a deal that you probably personally won't like, but it's a deal that sort of maybe progressives don't like and the Freedom Caucus doesn't like, but it can pass? Are you going to be able to accept a deal like that?
Chuck, to be blunt with you, we're not really sure what deal is even on the table. The White House is not serious. They came out with a proposal to spend another $30 billion more than they already wanted to spend. They're not taking a look at the reality of where our country is fiscally. Mm-hmm. Look, Joe Biden is saying that he's cut $1.7 trillion from the deficit, but everybody's saying that's not true. That's what he actually...
By the way, Joe Biden is not even saying that's true. Biden said 1.7 trillion. He said 1.7 billion. I mean, he's wish-washy on this stuff. I'm sure a couple of times he said something we didn't even understand that was a coherent thought. So Joe Biden himself has been wish-washy on what the numbers are. It keeps changing.
Actually has done is he's $1 trillion over what CBO was projecting spending was going to be, because after all of the COVID spending in the last year of President Trump, that Congress wasn't going to extend that, and Joe Biden did. So we're in a situation right now where the only plan in Washington has been passed by the House of Representatives. It's the only plan. Joe Biden's not serious at the negotiating table. I've talked with my colleagues who are in that room. So at this point, really the question is, what's the Senate going to do? Where's Chuck Schumer in all this? Because the Senate has not done any work at all, and Joe Biden has not done any work at all.
What did get you to?
Oh, well, we're being told that Joe Biden, is being briefed in on all this. Byron? No, Joe Biden cares a lot about this. As far as what he was doing for 7 hours in Japan, nobody knows. I mean, his own White House press secretary has no idea. But he was doing something. But he's going to be briefed when the meeting was done, you see. The reason why he's going to be briefed after is because they have to wake him up. You got to wake somebody up in order to brief them, and Joe Biden's sleeping. Joe Biden is sleeping. So it's just amazing. Democrats haven't done anything on this. The Republicans are trying to figure this whole thing out because we want to be fiscally responsible in terms of what our budget is, just as any average American's supposed to be with their budget. But when it comes to politicians in Washington, D.C., we could just spend $32 trillion and not even bat an eye about it.
Respond to something former President Trump said about the debt ceiling in 2019. Take a listen.
I can't imagine anybody ever even thinking of using the debt ceiling as a negotiating wedge.
Why don't you agree with him on this?
Well, first of all, he also said the other day on a rival network that he said that when he was president, and when asked why he wasn't saying it now, he said because he's not president. Listen, Donald Trump.
Not a fan of the answer that Donald Trump gave during the CNN town hall meeting, but it was at least an honest answer. It's not the best answer. It's not a good answer, by the way. Again, I'm a Trump supporter. I'll probably vote for Trump again over DeSantis, whoever is probably the leading runner, whether that's Donald Trump, DeSantis, Vivek Ramaswamy. Like, it just depends. All three of those guys I absolutely adore, but it was just not a good answer, and it's really tough to sit there and try to vindicate the president and kind of have his back on a statement like that. But Byron does actually a pretty good job here of backing the president on that statement.
Isn't that always
do you realize how absurd that sounds?
That is not absurd. He's
How is that not
always
absurd? It's
negotiating,
absurd.
Chuck. He's always negotiating. That's what he does.
Yeah.
That's actually one of the reasons why so many deals for our country worked out to our benefit as compared to his predecessors, both Republican and Democrat, because he's always
But
negotiating.
do you realize how partisan that sounds?
That's not a partisan statement.
What is good for me is not for thee.
Listen.
He's basically saying when I'm president,
Right.
there's no negotiating on this. But hey, when somebody else is president, screw 'em.
Well, no, here's the thing. Let's be realistic now. When Donald Trump was negotiating debt ceiling with Nancy Pelosi, mind you, they negotiated that.
No, they
when
didn't. They raised it without any restrictions.
When they were doing that, our economy was thriving. Our debt levels were not where they are right now. We were about $24 trillion, not $32 trillion. We weren't having massive deficits the way we are right now. It was a very different environment. Now you have $32 trillion on the credit card, and all House Republicans are saying is, let's go back to pre-pandemic spending. That's common sense stuff.
But there's one more thing, House.
I agree with what he's saying here with going back to the pre-pandemic spending. I am not a fan of Donald Trump's spending. I was not a fan of Republican spending. I'm a fiscal conservative. Not one of those like new modern day fiscal conservatives. I'm a fiscal conservative. I follow Dave Ramsey. When I say I follow Dave Ramsey, I don't spend money I don't have. I don't put something on a credit card. I pay cash with everything. I'm very clear in terms of what I do fiscally in terms of my budget as well. I budget on a monthly basis. So if we have to do those things as average Americans, why does the government, regardless of who the president is and Congress, get to sit there and just spend whatever money they want? But if we do the exact same thing, we have to file bankruptcy and we collapse. Well, you're going to see the same thing as an economy, an entire country here in just one moment if we don't pass this through. And I mean that quite literally. If we don't pass the debt ceiling and raise it, you're going to make freaking 1929 look like a freaking playground compared to what's going to happen.
Republicans are asking for, which is they want fewer IRS agents. They want fewer attempts to try to properly get tax receipts into the federal government's coffers. I have never understood the resistance of extra IRS agents unless you knowingly cheat on your taxes.
First of all, that's salacious, and you know that. Most Americans, by far, pay their taxes and they do it honorably. What House Republicans, and frankly the Republican Party, is concerned about is having IRS agents go after middle-class families and small business owners. When you have that many more agents, it's not to go after the rich. It's to go after the middle class. That's what it's for.
So if you're paying what you're supposed to pay, then you should have nothing to fear.
You would make the assumption.
As somebody that was literally a tax count for a lot of years, What an amazing piece of messaging coming from that Chuck Todd to Beat the Press. It's not always about that you committed some sort of fraud. It's about the hassle behind that. You have the IRS showing up at your business, or that might even be your tax preparer's firm that they're at, and just having to take the time to sit there and go through all the receipts, all the documentation, or the fact of you not doing anything and wasting your time. So this whole idea of like, well, you shouldn't be worried because you didn't commit fraud. It's not always about worried about committing fraud. Also, a lot of people don't know what's on their tax return because somebody else most likely did it for them, especially if the IRS is going after them. It's not going to be these simple W-2s with a 1099 interest form and a 1099 DIV, and that's it. No. They're going at, if you're going to have that many IRS agents, they're coming for everybody because we were told they weren't. Joe Biden said they weren't coming for the middle class and the lower class or whatever it may be. They're only going to go after the rich. No way. There's not enough rich people for that to happen, okay? So he lied on that front. They want the money, and they're going to sit there and pull every nickel and penny they can out of your purse because you didn't file maybe one receipt, and now they're going to tack on interest or whatever it may be, or you sat there and you put too much in contributions that you couldn't have. So even though you're not the one that prepared your tax return, yes, you are responsible for it. A lot of Americans don't know what's going on with their tax return. That's why they hire somebody out to do it. So you get audited for it, and something may have happened, and you didn't intentionally commit fraud because the tax code is insane. I used to have an entire conference room full of tax law. It's insane. The average American's not going to know that. But, hey, you're supposed to be scared of fraud. What are you worried about? I don't know. Maybe an IRS agent knocking on my front door that could take everything that's going to freak out anybody, including accountants themselves, are scared when we talk to the IRS. What a knucklehead.
That IRS audits are up, that they're putting out more liens on the American people. That's not true. That data is not there. All Joe Biden's trying to do is find every possible nickel out of every couch from every American to pay for his radical spending. Why would we do that? Listen, let me contrast for you. When we passed the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, CBO said it was going to cost $2 trillion. It's actually not true. What ended up happening was the federal government took in $1 trillion more than CBO actually projected. The economy grew another 1%
fairness,
over
we can't
projections.
litigate the tax cuts because of what happened with COVID. We don't know how much this ate into everything, but it certainly looks like there were going to be fewer revenues coming into the government, but we don't know. In fairness,
fewer revenues now.
There's no ability to litigate this because of what happened with COVID and the extra spending.
That is not true, Chuck. In 2019, we took in more revenue than we ever have in the history of our nation. As much of a percentage of our economy than we ever have as a nation. That was 2019.
Also added,
tax receipts are still up.
You realize that President Trump has added more to the deficit than...
Yes, Chuck, that's exactly why Republicans are trying to figure all this out so we don't keep adding to the debt. So we can figure this whole thing out so we don't keep spending trillions and trillions of dollars. Yes, you're exactly making a point. And I'd also like to mention, because this was a big contention when Donald Trump wanted to lower people's taxes. On average, the American taxpayer basically saved about 3% because their tax bracket was lowered. Now, one of the variables of you having to pay more taxes was that you would make more money, and the economy was actually doing really, really well. It was really healthy under Donald Trump. And so there were some people that actually paid more in taxes because they jumped up to the next tax bracket, or they made certain investment options that were good because they had more money in their pocketbook. And so you could take in, theoretically, more revenue as a federal government, even though you have a tax cut, because that revenue could be coming in different forms, or people are just making more money because they're able to invest that money in different avenues, and then at the end of the year, file more taxes, so they're paying more taxes to the federal government. It is possible. I'm not saying it is or wasn't, because Chuck Todd is right. We don't have any way of actually identifying that because of the pandemic, but there is a good thought process in terms of what Byron's saying here of we could actually increase revenues. It's kind of like the Reaganomics, the trickle-down economics in terms of taxes. It is possible.
Joe Biden. Some of it's COVID. Some of it's COVID.
Most of it is COVID. Let's be clear with the people.
Half of it's COVID and half of it's the tax cut.
That is not true because we raised more revenue. We raised more revenue than CBO projected. If you bring in more money than your projections are, how are you adding to your deficits, Chuck?
And if somehow you keep cutting taxes but more revenue comes into the government, that math doesn't work over time. You can have it in the first year due to some various accounting tricks, but it doesn't work over time.
No, Chuck, that is not true. The purpose of tax policy is to raise revenue for the federal government, not to equalize society. After the Trump tax cuts were passed, more tax revenue has come to the federal government than at any other time in the history of our nation. Those are the facts.
Raw dollars can happen because we do have
and a percentage of the economy.
We do have a growing economy.
Both of them have.
Let me ask you this on caps.
Sure.
Do you want to see caps on defense spending as well as domestic spending? Because right now there seems to be a dispute whether there's going to be budget caps only on domestic, or Republicans are also wanting caps on defense spending?
So internally, we're having this discussion about defense. We're looking at trying to see a way to keep defense spending in line because, there are threats all over the globe. We see it in Ukraine. We see what's happening with China's saber rattling with Taiwan, et cetera. So we want to make sure that our military preparedness is where it needs to be. But at the same
Thank you. This is huge. There's actually real threats and real enemies out there. And I always ask this question when I teach finance of what's our number one budget in terms of what we do our spending on? It's not military. Military is like third or fourth on the list, folks, okay? So there's this whole idea that our number one spending is military. It's like 20%, 20 to 25% of our budget, which is one of the main functions of our government, by the way, is to have a military and protect its citizens, especially when there's real evil out there. And there is evil out there that wants to wipe Western civilization off the face of the earth. Like, if they get a hold of you, folks, it's not going to be one of those, let's just throw you into jail and leave you alone. You better be prepared for what some of these leaders in these countries want to do to you and your family. It is insane. I can't even talk about it on YouTube for fear of being banned and censored off this platform. But there's real evil. You need a military. You need a big military like Trump wanted. What Obama did to our military is despicable. Closing down bases all across the United States. We don't need a military. There's no threats out there. It's insane stuff. Joe Biden's doing the exact same thing. He doesn't want to build our military. He says he will, but he doesn't.
Same time, House Republicans are not looking at just letting the Department of Defense just have massive radical increases as well. We have to control spending everywhere in our government.
Let me go back to the reality of politics. Tom Cole said any deal is going to lose people like you in the Freedom Caucus and people on the progressive side. And he added this to the dispatch. He said, we're not going to have a deal if the President of the United States doesn't sign it, and we're not going to have a deal if a majority of the House doesn't support it. So each side's not going to just simply give the other side what it wants. It's politics 101. I go back to my first question. Do you accept that premise?
I accept the premise that Joe Biden's got to come up with a deal. He doesn't have one. I would ask you, you should ask him, if he actually would take your question, you should ask him if he has a plan, if he has a strategy. The only thing he's ever said is it should just be clean. But nobody with an economic mind is saying, yeah, sure, just give the federal government a blank check.
So are you comfortable with breaching the debt ceiling?
No, I'm not comfortable with that. This should have been done 100 days ago. House Republicans have been working on this for 3 months. I've been in the room. I've been in those meetings. And while we were working on a strategy to raise our nation's debt ceiling, which is something the House of Representatives has passed, Joe Biden was ignoring it. And Chuck Schumer was ignoring it. And I think that he has been derelict in his duty.
Let me ask you about the presidential race we got.
And not just on the debt ceiling, by the way. You guys have been derelict of duty on literally everything, you guys. Everything. I can't emphasize this enough. I want Joe Biden to be successful. He's my president. I know some of you don't agree with that, he's not my president, all these things. Stolen election, whatever. Look, he's the president, you guys. Whether you like it or not, he's the president. He's the one sitting in the White House. He's the one that is calling certain shots and turning to the executive branch. Look, he's the president. I want him to do well. The problem is he's not doing well on many fronts. It's not like one little thing of like, he sucks with the economy, but hell, everything else he's doing is great. I mean, is thing after thing after thing this guy is not doing well in. Domestic policy, foreign policy, the economy, the border, keeping us safe. He's allowing spy balloons to freaking fly across the United States and take surveillance of our military installations. I mean, you name it. It's going south with this guy. He just can't figure it out.
Off more on the debt ceiling than I think either one of us expected. I want to play your celebration of Governor DeSantis and ask you about it on the other side. Here it is.
The newly re-elected, Democrat-beaten, freedom standing for America's Governor, Ron DeSantis.
Obviously, you chose to support right now Donald Trump instead of who you described as America's governor there. What could Governor DeSantis have done to convince you to stick with him and not the former president?
Well, first of all, that speech was pretty good, Chuck. You got to acknowledge that. That was good stuff. Anyway, look, to me, it's not really about Donald Trump versus Ron DeSantis. It's about what America needs. And that's where I've been really since day one. I talked a little bit about foreign policy in the last block. We have a situation right now where Russia's on the move and China is on the move. We need somebody who can step in day one, look at Vladimir Putin, look at Xi Jinping and say, okay, enough. I'm back. We're going to get everything in order the way it was
DeSantis has
before.
that ability?
I think it's going to take him time. I think there's only one person who has that ability right now, and it's Donald Trump. And for all the naysayers who would say, oh, he's unpredictable, oh, we don't know what he's going to do, let's be very clear. When he was president of the United States, the world was in a much safer place. Nobody can say that the world is safer now than when it was when he was president.
He called January.
And it was the same thing under Obama as well. I mean, Thomas Sowell, thinks that Barack Obama was the worst president in American history because of his deal, in air quotes, with Iran, basically enabling Iran to give nuclear weapons, giving like $1 billion, all this other stuff in cash. I 100% agree. I love Ron DeSantis. I'm not against Ron DeSantis whatsoever. Donald Trump has done the job. We know what he's willing to do and not do. I agree he says some knucklehead things. They're about to go into January 6th, and Donald Trump saying it was a perfect day. It was not a perfect day. But he also said to protest peacefully. There's a lot of idiots out there that when he did some knucklehead things, a lot more evidence is coming out regarding what happened with January 6th. We've talked about it here on the Bald Brad Show as well. Check those out in our video catalog. But he's correct here. Ron DeSantis does not have the time right now. Russia's invaded Ukraine. China wants to invade Taiwan in the next 2 years here. They've already had their plans leaked in terms of what provinces they need to sit there and protect, because if those provinces are taken over or bombed, basically their invasion of Taiwan would fall apart because they're not able to get supplies there. I mean, the whole strategy has just come out regarding China wanting to invade Taiwan. You got Iran wanting to take Israel off the face of the earth, as well as us. So there's a lot of threats out there. We need a guy to come in and sit there and fix a lot of it. He fixed what Obama did in 4 years. He could fix what Joe Biden did in 4 years. Hopefully, a lot of damage has been done, but I think Donald Trump can do the job, and it's also his last 4 years, so he can go hell bent on a lot of this stuff and doesn't have to worry about re-election because the man is sitting there fixing it. And again, he doesn't have to worry about the upcoming election. Well, moving into our last story of the day, we got Bud Light's Nightmare from Hell, and we got the I guess another gladiator here, Mr. Wonderful himself, Kevin O'Leary, talking about it. We're not going to watch the whole thing here, but I do want to highlight some aspects of what he's talking about from businessman to businessman. I am nowhere near of equal weight to Kevin O'Leary. I'm not trying to be, but I know kind of the basics about business and the basics about accounting and stuff like that. I'm not giving myself a pat on the back. I haven't been an accountant for a lot of years. A lot of the knowledge from Accounting 101 has faded from me, but I could still at least give my commentary on terms of what he's talking about and what Bud Light did and the asinine things and decisions that they made in terms of what they did with pushing a certain agenda. Let's go ahead and roll it.
Well, Bud Light has become the poster boy for brand mismanagement from multiple perspectives. So let me lay it out for you, because the discussions that have arisen and the narrative that's arisen around Bud Light is probably a good lesson for every CEO in every sector of the economy. Number one, it highlights the power of social media. This issue went viral in 48 hours.
Yeah.
And most often when an issue goes viral like that, it burns out in another 48 hours. But that's not what happened here. The story and narrative changed to sales. And so people that did not like the message, regardless of where you stand on these social issues or gender narrative or whatever, they took it out by basically boycotting the product immediately.
Yeah.
And switching preference to other brands that did not make them get involved in this issue.
And other viral videos go on social media, like Kid Rock shooting Bud Light cans and people dumping Bud Light and all. And so that just adds to it, right?
Well, it's because that narrative became very powerful and people piled on. Now, if you're trying to manage that and trying to learn something from it, and I certainly talk to all my CEOs about this, because here we are talking about it.
Something that a lot of people don't talk about as well is how easy it is for the consumer to just go buy another brand of beer. There's a lot of different types of beer out there. There's craft beer, there's imported beer. I mean, there's a lot of beer for Americans to drink, and Bud Light's just not that good. I don't drink Bud Light. I drink predominantly Stone from San Diego. Stone, if you haven't had it, try it. Stone IPA, they got double IPA. Sometimes they got a triple IPA, Rune 10. They got Rune Nation, that double IPA that's phenomenal. If you don't like IPAs, I get it. It's kind of an acquired taste. But it's easy for people to just go buy more beer. The reason why we're not seeing so much of a transition away from like Disney Plus, even though they're not doing well, or other sort of media, is because conservatives don't have a grasp on the media yet. That's why you have literally Fox News, but then you have CNN, MSNBC, ABC, CBS, all these other left-wing-ish media outlets around it. There's nowhere really for Republicans to go other than the kind of podcasts like mine or Dan Bongino or others. So it's an easier barrier to entry, if you want to call it that. It's not a barrier to entry to the consumer, but they're able to sit there and access other beer more quickly than they would be to, hey, you know what, I want to go to another streaming service. Well, they're just not out there. So I think a lot of power was in the hands of the consumer in terms of boycotting this, because there's other great beer out there for them to choose.
In its second month.
Yeah.
This is a nightmare from hell for the brand.
And
really
the sales some brands in Anheuser-Busch have had declines get lesser, but Bud Light's still down big.
This is worse than New Coke, Old Coke, and it's becoming its own story for the ages. I'll be teaching this one at Harvard. There's no question about it. Because you have to ask yourself, in crisis management, what do you do? Because if you go to the other side and try and balance the gender narrative, you're going to get a whole new onslaught of people that don't like.
Not just an onslaught of whole new people. And Bud Light tried this, by the way. What Kevin O'Leary's talking about, they've already tried this, of instituting that commercial with the horse running around, trying to be all patriotic. People are going to take that as you're patronizing them. You've already sat there and pushed a certain agenda. You've already claimed a certain territory of which you've never claimed before. And how one side felt was that you're now shifting perspective. Before you're pro-America, and what a lot of people tend to believe is the other side of the aisle doesn't like the American flag. That's the Democrat Party, the progressive left. Predominantly don't like the American flag. They don't like what this country stands for. They think this country's racist. So by you switching over to what conservatives, Republicans felt like, and some independents as well, to the other side of the aisle, and then you're patronizing them with this pro-America, even though you're like, well, you just sat there and moved to the other side of the aisle. It's not a big fan of the American flag and what America stands for. So they're going to feel lied to and cheaped out at the end of the day, and they're not going to go back. If anything, they're going to boycott you more, which is what's happening.
And there have been bars that have banned all Anheuser-Busch products because Bud Light tried to distance itself from Dylan Mulvaney and what happened.
So the lesson learned, and what everybody should think about in every consumer product category, when you take polarized positions on any narrative,
there you go,
you are going to alienate 50% of your consumer 100% of the time. So if you're willing to do something very controversial because you think it's going to go viral in a positive way, you need to analyze the downside in a negative way as well. In consumer goods and services, Republicans drink beer, Democrats drink beer. Some believe in the gender neutrality, some don't, but they all consume your product. So
Correct.
If you know that with certainty and you have billions of dollars of capitalization at stake, why would you go down that road in the first place?
Exactly. And this is what we've been talking about here on the Bald Brad Show. Why is Disney pushing a certain agenda? Because they're alienating a certain base or a certain customer set of which they have. There's no reason to push it, but they want to push it. Or if you're going to push it, just have it happen naturally, not in every single film. You know, a lot of one thing we have to get kind of a grasp here is a lot of the Democrats and the left think that conservatives, Republicans are just absolutely against gays and the LGBTQ community. That is not the case. There's a lot of people that are part of the LGBTQ community that are Republicans and conservatives. Where things started going south was shoving it down people's throats in every film, every newspaper, every ad, like all the time, where it's like, just let it happen naturally. That's fine. We'll let it happen naturally. It's been a thing for quite some time, for decades, by the way. But now that it's like every time you're even changing scripts to where that's not how people talk, it's being shoved in our throat. And then what kind of pushed conservatives, Republicans over the edge was going after the children. That's really what did it. If we had to sit there and claim a stake to like, hey, let's draw a line in the stand. This is where things went south. This is where Republicans and conservatives, and by the way, some Democrats and independents as well, have had enough, specifically in the trans community, isn't the fact that people want to be trans. No, again, conservative Republicans look liberal in the idea of like, hey, go do whatever it is you want to do. Just leave us alone. The problem is you're not leaving us alone. You're targeting our kids in the classroom, on Disney Plus, on the media, on TV, whatever it may be. You're going after them constantly. Whereas if you just left the kids alone, I think conservatives, Republicans would roll their eyes, just as I do. Like, okay, here's another thing. I just want to watch a movie. I don't want something crammed down my throat. I'm here just for entertainment. Why can't I just be entertained? Why are you throwing ideology at me constantly? Like, that's all we want. But what Kevin O'Leary doesn't understand is these people have an agenda. In the same way, there's activist teachers in the classroom. Activist teachers are activists before they are teachers, meaning they're going to push their agenda before they're actually going to be teachers. I'm a teacher. I'm not an activist. I just want to teach math. I just want your kid, regardless of LGBTQ community. I love them all. I try my best to be respectful to all students, regardless of who they are, race, ethnicity, all those things. I just want them to do well and be successful in life. That's all I genuinely care about. I don't care about if they're gay. I don't care about if they're lesbian. I don't care about if they're trans. I don't care about any of that. I just want them to be successful, good people with good morals, and just be okay in life. That's all I care about. And that they do well in my classroom in terms of mathematics. That's what I really care about. I don't want to push an agenda on them. I don't even care if they're Democrats or leftists or whatever it is. I could care less. But there are activists out there that want to indoctrinate your children, and they will do everything they can. They'll take down a company. You're seeing that with Disney. These executives, the stuff's been leaked in terms of their meetings on what they've said. They wanted like 50% of their movies and stuff like that to have like an LGBTQ lead by like a certain date and time. So they have an agenda, and that's why Disney Plus is tanking, guys. There's other variables that go into it, but it's one of many variables as to why they're tanking. There's a lot of reasons why the parks for Disney is what's uplifting or holding them together at present time. That's why they bring Bob back. They got rid of Chapek and brought back Iger. So Kevin needs to understand is that there's people that are activists before whatever title comes after their name. And they're willing to damage a company, like you just saw with Bud Light, to push that agenda. They don't care. It's not their money. They don't care. So that's my 2 cents on it. A little more than 2 cents right there, but I appreciate you listening nonetheless.
And so if I were a board member there saying, show me who's responsible for this, because at the end of the day, when you go into new territory in consumer goods or services, like changing the flavor, as Coke found out decades ago, you need to own that as the CEO. If you're the man or woman running this thing, you need to own it 100%, because you can't blame it on a brand manager. You can't blame it on an advertising agency. You own it. And so
I don't agree with that. Yes, you can. I'm not saying the CEO isn't liable either. He is. CEO and everybody else that sat there and pushed us forward need to be gone, need to be fired. I mean, you just cost the company billions of dollars in market. Like billions of dollars. Like, dude, if it was in the millions, they should be fired. It's insane. You just sat there and crippled the company. I mean, Disney got rid of Bob Chapek, right? Got rid of the CEO. They got rid of Disney Plus execs as well. They're getting rid of people because they see what's going on. Yeah, the CEO and other people need to be fired for this. Absolutely. Absolutely. But you can't just sit there, well, it all rests on him. I don't agree with that, because there's a lot of things that the CEO is possibly not aware of. But, Kevin O'Leary knows more than I do, obviously. I agree with what he's saying, but at the same time, brand, come on. Brand needs to go as well.
now what's happened within corporate America, and I can assure you this has been a conversation in every boardroom, is who's running brand here? Who's deciding what networks we post on? Who is actually doing our social media? Who is actually calling the shots on the content? Because never before has the control of content after those frames leave and get posted, you don't have control of it anymore. The rest of the world decides what they want to do with it. And you've given plenty of examples how it gets reposted and used to promote other people's narratives.
Yeah.
And so that brand got decimated. And at the end of the day, I'm sorry to say this, but the CEO, it's their fault.
So what? Okay,
Partially.
Let's say I'm Bud Light. I'm on Shark Tank. I need money. And you give, I give you, Mr. Wonderful, give us 20%. I'll give you a 20% stake. Help us. What would you do? How would you fix this? Can you fix this?
Well, as in, I look at the decimation of the brand within a portfolio of brands. I mean, Bud Light used to be the go-to college beer, the Colorado pure water story, all that stuff. It got decimated here. It's no longer that beer. It's a beer with a sordid past. And so you have to think about, what do you do with that? How do you creatively dig yourself out of that hole?
This is such a phenomenal question, and I know I'm pausing on him. Again, we're not going to listen to the whole thing, but I really do want to hear what he has to say here, because I don't know how you dig yourself out of this hole. You've already alienated 50% of the people, more than 50%, by the way, that drink your beer. Because Democrats are very patriotic as well, some of them, and they really love the beer. They love what it stands for. So you're looking at more than 50%, and there's not all Democrats are on board with the LGBTQ trans community pushing stuff on your children, all this stuff that's really going on. I don't know how they dig themselves out of this hole, because you can't just start pushing patriotic stuff now, because we already know what you stand for. We already know your ideology. We already know all these things. So I don't know how they're going to get people back. I lower their prices, I guess, where it's so damn cheap. We're like, I might as well drink it.
How do you reestablish that brand? And I'm not sure there's a clear path right now. Everybody involved in that brand is begging for the media to stop. And here you are with me talking about it again, months later.
Yeah.
And it's not the only conversation I've had. And so when I now talk about branding and managing brands, and I teach young cohorts, mostly graduating engineers, which is where I focus, this is the case. This is the one that you're actually living today. And so for me, what I would, if I had to try and, think about how would you manage out of this hole, first step is stabilization. First step is to stabilize the decline. Stop it from declining.
That's not easy to do, though.
No, it's not. But you can't think about gaining share yet. You just have to stop the narrative. And,
cauterize the wound and then go from there.
Correct.
There's lots of metrics, and we do this in our own businesses. You can actually monitor by the hour on every platform what is occurring.
Okay.
And so you have to find, if I were doing this, I would have that analysis in front of me saying, where are the green shoots in this story? Where are we getting some support? Where are our users talking about their childhood growing up with Bud Light? Bud Light as
reaching for straws,
a favorable
folks.
choice on a caloric basis, on a nutritional basis, whatever it is. Where are the green shoots? Where do we spend there? Because Bud Light is a light beer. There is demand for light beers, particularly amongst beer drinking men over 40.
Yes, but there's a lot of, like you just said, there's a lot of light beers and there's a lot of other options for people to choose. And the fact that you just pissed them off, they're going to stick with the other beer. And by the way, you might have lost that customer forever, regardless of whether Bud Light switches things around. They might actually enjoy that other beer that they weren't willing to try beforehand because they were so stuck in their path and their ways with Bud Light that they weren't willing to transition to another beer because people in general don't like change. And so once you lose a customer, it's actually really hard to get them back. So somebody else probably just stayed over with that beer for maybe the remainder of their life, possibly.
I mean, you got to go there and find those green shoots. And, clearly when you're in crisis mode and heads are going to roll.
Oh, yeah.
It's just too much capitalized loss. It's
there you
just
go.
too much.
That's what I said.
Influencers are.
He's basically saying, look, there's not much you can do. And without maybe saying it, and to go a little bit deeper, you're going to take some losses here if you're Bud Light. And I think I've tried to think about this myself because I love business. I have an accounting mind. I like going around places. I have that place stay in business. That's a terrible location. The electricity, the rent on the building. I run the math all the time whenever I go out shopping or go to Disneyland or whatever it is. They're going to have to go, they need to go rogue for a little bit. Stop all the advertisement. You're going to save money there for a little bit. You need to just go dark for a while. You're going to have to cut. You're going to lose money. But like you said, you seem to stabilize things for a little bit. That comes in terms of cuts. People aren't going to buy your beer. You're gonna have less beer on the shelf, and maybe that's a good thing because it gives some sort of perspective of like, hey, you're not selling the beer, or you are selling the beer. It doesn't matter. You need to sit back and just go dark for a little bit and have Americans forget, because Americans do forget. You go rogue for a little bit. I'm talking like a year, maybe even longer, and you sit there and then you come back with an ad with new leadership, with new people. You made a drastic change. You got rid of the people that sit there and pushed and peddled this whole thing, and then maybe you can gain the trust back from your customers. But boy, oh boy, did you put a dagger through yourself. And that one lady that did it, we all saw her on the airwaves, that one lady that did it really did a doozy here on the company. And Bob Iger, I fully believe, saw this a little bit with Disney, which is why they're firing a lot of executives in terms of the media and other avenues of people at the top, because you're having these people push an agenda and it's crippling. Americans will deal with stuff up to a certain point. But like I said, the second you start dealing with certain agendas, or you're pushing something a little bit too much, America just had enough of it. We've had enough of it. And Kevin O'Leary's right. This is going to be the one in the textbooks for business school, business law, business marketing, whatever it is. This is going to be an example of, if you're a corporation, just stay out of it. Just stay out of politics. People want your product, and just have your product speak for itself. Have your service speak for itself. Now, in terms of what we do here in the Bald Brad Show, I have a brand, right? A patriotic brand. I'm here pro-America. I'm a conservative Republican. Doesn't mean I don't like Democrats. We hound them a lot. But that's because they do very knucklehead things nowadays. It doesn't mean that Democrats have always done bad things, you guys. Democrats have done good things. They're limited and far few between. But would I love them to watch the show? Yeah, because I want them to come over to the other side. But am I alienating half the country? Absolutely. I'm absolutely alienating. But that's not my base. It's not who I'm trying to reach. If I could, that'd be great. But it's tough to try to reach those people because I'm very firm in what I believe. I'm very firm in pro-America values, the Constitution, the United States of America, this country, there's real evil out there, all those other things. That's for a whole nother video. But I want to know what you think. Can Bud Light recover from this? And if so, how long is it going to take? Really, guys, write in the comment section. It does support the show. We would love to hear from you. I'm not just saying that. I really do swipe through, read all your comments. I'm trying to like every single one of them, reply to some of them. But really, can Bud Light recover from this, do you think? And if they do, what do they have to do to actually recover? Because it'd be interesting to hear everybody's perspective on this. Maybe you have friends or family members that are in branding or at Bud Light. Like, what do they need to do to sit there and get you back to buy their beer? I ain't never buying Bud. I stopped drinking Bud Light in college. Like I said, I drink one beer predominantly. That's Stone. If I can't get Stone, I get a Flat Tire or Newcastle. That's very rare. Predominantly, it is Stone IPAs all the way. Folks, thank you so much for joining the Bald Brad Show. We went a little bit long here, but I hope you enjoyed the podcast nonetheless. Hey, buy yourself a copy of Trojan Horse, How the Left is Destroying America. They've already done it to Bud Light, Disney, and other companies. They will destroy this country from the inside out. You can buy it at Barnes & Noble's, Amazon. We are going to do signed copies. Actually, it's already up on the website. I need to figure out a P.O. box because I don't really want my address on the mailing thing, but you could buy your copy actually right now. A signed copy, $50 for hardcover. There's limited, folks. There's only 10 hardcovers. So if you run over there now and pick it up, it could very well be gone. And then I think there's like 20, I think there's maybe 20 or 30 paperback versions that are signed copies. So we're only limited on this stuff. The second it runs out, we'll have to figure something else out and get more signed copies out. I would imagine, based on the poll, these are going to sell out really, really quick. So go over to baldbrad.com, get yourself a copy of Trojan Horse, a signed copy of How the Left is Destroying America. We have merch, folks. Get yourself a mug. Drink coffee with us in the morning. I know Lisa, Shib, and a bunch of other people like Neil. Get yourself a cup of mug, Bald Brad Show stuff. Got merch, hats, all that stuff for you. Thank you so much. Hit the community tab. Some of you are joining Patreon. I forgot that we had a Patreon. Patreon, here, join anywhere. Would love for you to support the show in all aspects, and I'll see you tomorrow here on The Bald Brad Show.